The Hero Least Likely by Ruth Nordin, Chapter 13. The next morning, just as the sun was beginning to appear in the sky, Zeke secured his bedroll to his horse. Maybe Blaze trusted Faye, but he still wasn't sure about her. It was odd that Faye was too adept at handling a gun and a knife. It made him think that Wilson had trained her so she would work with him. After all, who would suspect a woman of foul play? But he supposed if it turned out that Faye was a threat, Blaze would be able to deal with it. Blaze could deal with anything. As quick as Faye was, she wasn't any match for Blaze. She came close, though, and that was why Zeke felt it best to wake up before she did. Faye had decided to join them outside while they slept. He wasn't sure why she had chosen to do that. Perhaps she didn't fully trust any of them any more than they trusted her. Whatever the reason, her eyes were closed at the moment, and she had a blanket tucked up around herself to keep warm. That meant he didn't have to be on his guard. Since he had some time to himself, he retrieved his canteen and a couple of newspapers. Then he went to a spot where he could get comfortable on the ground. Yes, he'd read those newspapers already, but it never hurt to go through the articles again, especially when they were heading into an area known for encounters with the Red Ghost. But before he turned his attention to the papers, he thought he'd take time to enjoy the sunrise. People who slept past the sunrise missed out on the most beautiful part of the day, and that was a real shame. Come to think of it, Blaze not giving Bernadette that necklace was a shame too. With a shake of his head, he took a drink of water from the canteen and watched as the sun came up over the horizon. No matter the day or time of year, sunrises never fail to satisfy. He's seen a couple of paintings where an artist tried to capture the true glory of a sunrise, but they all failed. No one could properly display this kind of beauty. One had to see the original in order to fully appreciate it, and the amazing thing about sunrises was that they were never the same. Once there was enough light to read, he picked up the first newspaper on the stack and went to the article on the front page. Red Ghost Terrorizes Sheep. This one took place just a few miles east of Quartzsite. A rancher was sleeping when he heard a disturbance. His dog was barking and the sheep were bleeding. He grabbed his gun and ran out of the house. He narrowly missed being charged by a large red creature that was red with blood. He dropped the gun and ran back into his house until daybreak. When he woke up the next morning, half of his flock was dead, and the ground was covered with blood. Zeke pulled out another newspaper, but he had to turn to the second page to find the article that he was looking for. The first page had an article about some special local election in Prescott. The second article was about how the area was drier than it had been the previous years. Zeke's gaze went to the article that he was searching for. Man missing for a month, saw red ghost. The local man of Prescott claimed he had been on his way southwest when he got caught in a dust storm. Out of the storm came a fierce beast, bellowing and roaring at him. The man said he barely made it away from the beast alive, and based on the description he gave the reporter, the newspaper editor concluded the beast had to be the Red Ghost. Unfortunately, it didn't go into detail about what the Red Ghost looked like, because there wasn't enough space in the article. But then, Zeke supposed the editor of the paper figured everyone in the area knew what the monster looked like. The third paper had two articles about the Red Ghost. One was about a 10-year-old girl spotting the Red Ghost a mile from her family's home when she was getting water from the well. This one did go into detail about how the monster looked. It was a good 7 feet tall with glowing red eyes. It had reddish-brown fur that was glistening with something wet on it. It ran across the desert on all 4 legs like a horse. It had a horn sticking up in the middle of its back, and there was a man riding it. The man had a sword in his hand and was yelling for death. She didn't get a close look at the man, though. She only got a good look at the Red Ghost, and given how frightening that was, Zeke figured that she did a good job of conjuring up the memory later when the reporter came to interview her. If Blaze thought this thing was a simple camel just going through Arizona, he was mistaken. There was no way a single camel could create this much destruction. The second article was about the Red Ghost ramming through a couple's home, but Zeke only read the first sentence when he heard someone moving in the camp. He set the paper down and looked out over the group. Bernadette was going into the outhouse. He made sure Faye was still sleeping before he turned his attention back to the paper. Zeke finished the article, noting that the couple reported a slightly different account of the red ghost's appearance than their little girl did. They described it as being larger than a horse and stronger than a bull. They did mention that something in the shape of a man was on its back, but they didn't get a close enough look to see if the thing was human. They also said it looked red in the glow of their fireplace. "We ran as soon as it barged through our home. We're just glad to still be alive," the man had told the reporter. The wife didn't have anything to add to that statement. Zeke had to admit the girl's account was far more fantastical than the couple's. He wasn't sure which one to believe. Was it more like an animal than a monster? The only way to know was to see the thing for himself. But did he really want to do that? "You're always up before everyone else." He jerked and turned in time to see Bernadette sitting next to him. How was it that he hadn't heard her approach? He glanced over at the camp and saw that the others were still asleep. The last thing he wanted was for Blaze to realize how quickly he'd put his guard down. It was important that he had a hand in apprehending Lee and Wilson. No one back home would credit him for getting Bauer and his gang. All the glory for that went to Blaze. He needed to succeed this time. Then when his uncle made him sheriff one day, the town would accept it. "I thought you read all those papers already," Bernadette continued, as she spread her skirt out in front of her on the ground so that her legs were properly covered. Zeke had caught a glimpse of her calf, but tried not to think about it. She was for Blaze. He had to keep that in mind. "Do you think one of those articles will change if you read it enough?" she asked. Amused at the teasing tone in her voice, he grinned. "It would be fun if it did, wouldn't it?" "If a paper could do that, it would be fun to read." "You don't enjoy reading the newspaper?" he asked. She shook her head. "They're boring. I prefer to read a book. And not the books about things that have happened, or about famous people's lives. Those are the kind of books my brother likes to read. I prefer to read about people and events that could never happen. I like to use my imagination. My favorite book is Alice in Wonderland. Have you read it?" "No," he said. "I didn't even know such a book existed. What is it about?" "It's about a girl named Alice who chases a rabbit down through a hole until she ends up in an enchanted place where she can grow really big or get really small and where animals can talk. All sorts of strange things happen to her." He was surprised she wasn't interested in reading the newspapers to find out about the red ghost, since she enjoyed fanciful works. Instead of voicing the thought, he said, "I like to read newspapers because I want to know what's happening in Arizona, so I can help keep it safe. I admit that the red ghost tickles the imagination. Not in a good way, of course. No one wants to see people and animals die or get injured from something roaming in the desert. However, if I were to write a book, I'd use the red ghost somewhere in the course of the story." "What would this thing do?" she asked. "It would go around creating mayhem, like this one does. But I'd make it more of a monster. Maybe it would be something out of a myth. When I was a child, my mom had this book of myths where these unusual creatures like centaurs and mermaids were in it. There would always be some hero who had to save innocent people from them. I'd write something like that." Her eyes grew wide. "Those stories sound like something I'd enjoy. Do you write?" "Heck no, I don't have the time. I have made up some stories, and I've told them to a few kids in town. I don't scare them with them, though. Their parents wouldn't like that." "Would you scare your own kids with the stories?" He thought about lying to her, but he figured there was no point in it. Sure, the mothers in Flagstaff were adamant that he watch what he told their children. But if these were his own kids, then their rules didn't apply. "Growing up, my pa would tell me all kinds of ghost stories. Sometimes those stories kept me up at night, but they were a lot of fun. I'd like to pass those on to my kids someday." "If I tell you something," she began, "you can't tell Lucas. Actually, you can't tell Gail either. She'll only tell Lucas." Catching the impish tone in her voice, Zeke leaned toward her in interest. "I can keep a secret. When we were children, I snuck a book of Grimm's fairy tales out of my father's library. Mother forbade us to read them because of how scary some were. That was why he put them on the highest shelf. But I knew where the ladder was, and I got it when no one was in the room. I hid the book in my room for a month and read the entire thing. I put it back in the library when I was done, and no one ever found out. Zeke figured that he should be appalled. She was a young woman who'd grown up in a reputable household. Of all people, she should have obeyed her parents in everything. But there was that other side of him, the side that wasn't a lawman, who couldn't blame a curious child for wanting to know what kind of stories were in those fairy tales. His father had told him some of those tales, and yes, he could understand why a mother might be wary of them. His own mother had allowed his father to tell those stories to him. But he bet that if he'd been a girl, his mother would not have approved of it. Like it or not, there were things boys were allowed to do that girls weren't, though he thought that he would tell his own children those stories, even if they were girls. And if someone like Bernadette were his wife, then he would have to worry about his wife objecting to it. It was a shame that she had her heart set on marrying Blaze. "So, you're not going to tell anyone, are you?" Bernadette asked. "Of course not," he assured her. "I gave you my word, and I'm going to honor it." After a moment, he added, "Are you going to tell Blaze?" "Why would I tell him?" He didn't think he would have to explain that one to her. She was going to marry him. "I don't think Blaze bothers with reading books," she continued. "He seems more interested in pursuing danger than reading about it. He didn't even want to stay and watch the play about the Red Ghost." Oh, well, Zeke supposed that was another way of looking at things. Blaze probably wouldn't want to know what a grim story even was. "I believe that protecting people from outlaws is important," he said, "but there should be a time for enjoying a good story." "Yes, I think so too. Reading is fun. Sharing stories is also fun. I'm not sure if I believe everything about the Red Ghost that was in the play, but it was still an entertaining diversion. The days of riding the horse from one watering hole to the next can get long. I don't blame Lucas for wanting to take a break from it." He refrained from explaining that it wasn't the tedious days of riding their horses that made Lucas want to stay in town. If Blaze had exhibited more common sense, he would have shown her why those breaks were so important. Gail seemed very happy with those breaks. There was no denying the blush on her cheeks, and the smiles that she kept giving Lucas when she didn't realize others were looking. Bernadette ought to have the same kind of blush and smile right now. Zeke pushed the thought aside. He had no business thinking of what he would like to do with her. He didn't know how Blaze could take one look at her and not want to haul her off to the first preacher he could find. She was so beautiful. For instance, right at this moment, the morning sun cast a lovely glow on her face that softened her features and gave her a pleasant pink tint to her cheeks. How could Blaze not want to kiss her? How could he not want to take her in his arms and hold on to her? Even while pursuing outlaws, he ought to be distracted by her. Unless he didn't really want to marry her. Unless he was only going to do so because he had promised Lucas he would. Zeke blinked in surprise. Where had that thought come from? "When are we going to arrive in Granite Wash Pass?" Bernadette asked. It took Zeke a moment to focus his attention on the journey ahead of them. He cleared his throat and gathered his newspapers. "I figure we'll get there tomorrow. At the pace we're going, we can probably make it there in the afternoon. The nice thing is that Granite Wash Pass has plenty of water, and there are some settlements. I doubt we'll come across anything as nice as Prescott, but we might be able to load up on a couple more supplies." He glanced over at the camp and saw that Blaze was sitting up while Faye stirred from her sleep. Turning his attention back to Bernadette, he said, "I hope we're not making a mistake by taking Faye. I understand why you don't trust her, but Blaze has good instincts about this kind of thing, don't you think?" she asked. Considering the fact that Blaze wasn't hopelessly in love with Bernadette, Zeke didn't know what to think. "I'm going to be on guard. One of us has to do what's best for the group." She seemed ready to ask him how he intended to do that, but even he wasn't sure at the moment. He would have to think about it. He got to his feet and reached forward to help her up. He pretended not to notice the spark that coursed through him at her touch, or the way his heart skipped a beat when she smiled at him. This was torture. The longer he was stuck on this trail, the more he wanted her. There was no way he was going to be there when Blaze married her. When the preacher asked if anyone protested the union, he was going to have to speak up. And how embarrassing would it be when she would end up telling him that she didn't even want to be with him? Blaze went to Lucas and Gale to wake them up. Taking that as his cue, Zeke escorted Bernadette back to the group so they could get ready to head out.